Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Gregory Skinner. I'm VP of Strategic Insights here at Escalent. And I'm happy to be here and present success strategies forging ahead in uncertain times. Certainly it's a crazy atmosphere and environment out there. So what we're going to talk about today are some of the ways to think about how to be successful in the future, some of the strategies that underpin that, but more importantly, I think opportunities that exist in the commercial vehicle space that perhaps we haven't really considered before, or perhaps we have to go and think about developing. So with that, let me just introduce myself a little bit more formally. So I work at Escalent, which is a global advisory and consulting firm. Been here for quite a while, and I've been in the automotive space for quite a bit of time too. Now, I've been in commercial vehicles for probably the last 4 or 5 years, and I spent the vast majority of my time prior to that working in passenger car. So that includes everything from sort of the most small, minute econo boxes all the way up into pure luxury sports cars. Now, the reason I'm telling you that is because I want to talk about the opportunities of commercial vehicle relative to passenger car. So the thing about passenger is that it's been around forever. Passenger cars, as you know, have been around, since for decades. But the thing about that is it's fundamentally an old model. Our relationship with vehicles is pretty highly defined and pretty highly refined. So the way that a person, a man, a woman, a boy, a girl, a child relates to the car has not really changed that much over time. So its evolution is now what we're seeing is its evolution is being underpinned or driven by what we're calling software-defined vehicles, which is really what happens when we turn a car from, or an SUV or a truck from being that into something else. So before I tell you what a software-defined vehicle is, does anybody know what the vehicle is on this screen? Chances are, unless you drive one, you probably don't. And the reason is because we're slowly sort of gravitating into everything sort of looking and behaving the same. The answer to this thing is it's a Kia Sportage. But I, who work in the commercial vehicle space, had to go look that up. So that tells you something. When we talk about software-defined vehicles, a software-defined vehicle is any vehicle that manages its operations, functionality, and enables new features primarily through software. So if you think back about what was the car, let's say 10, 20, 30 years ago, it was a mechanical beast, right? Well, going into the future, it's all going to be software driven, and we're going to change it so that now the passenger gets to experience more. Now it's not about driving, it's going to be about the user experience. And that's what you see on screen. You have all these embedded systems, sensors, controls to keep the occupant safe. We have telemetry on board so that we can do software updates, like over-the-air updates. The vehicle can communicate back to home base and to other vehicles. We have hardware on board like ECUs, controllers, chips, everything to keep the dynamics of the vehicle in check and in play. But that one in the top right is really sort of what most people think of and where we're going to land when we think software defined. Infotainment systems, vehicle controls, cockpits, advanced driver systems, all of these things that are really about the user experience. So now more than ever, you're going to climb into a vehicle and it's going to be, the environment is going to be technology focused. And that's what you see on the left. You control your music, you can check sports, watch movies. This doesn't just mean that we're talking autonomous, which eventually we'll get there, but really what it means is that now all of a sudden you're immersed in that system or in that environment. You can check your emails. I've done work on what we call sound zones, which is really interesting. So just really quickly what that is, let's say you're the driver and you want to take a call, but you don't want other people in the car to hear it. Well, we can create a sound zone where you can take your conference call and other occupants can play music or talk to each other and they won't hear what you're talking about. Or let's say you have kids, everybody in the car can have their own different sound zone and listen to different music, and the noise won't clash with each other, the sound won't clash with each other. So really cool stuff, like really exciting time when it comes to what's going on in a passenger car. Here's the thing. That love affair for what a vehicle could be does not exist in commercial vehicle. Commercial vehicle, we're talking about, rubber hits the road, real people doing real things, job has to get done. And I have countless stories about fleet managers who are basically annoyed by the sheer amount of tech that's on board the new trucks. So it's one thing to change an alternator, but it's another thing when you're trying to track down a sensor failure on a Class 8, and it's some silly little thing that's in the back of a truck. It costs you like $20, and it takes down the truck for a week because you got to have 2 techs on board, like checking all the electronics, going through body harnesses. Could be a huge pain. So suffice it to say, OEMs like and need technology because it makes the trucks more efficient, better to control. You can reduce costs over the long run for the people who own them. But fleet managers, for them, or owners, it basically adds cost and complexity. So that, again, that sort of love affair that you get in passenger doesn't exist in commercial. But as we move to, increasingly towards software-defined vehicles, there's still lots of room for hardware-defined vehicles, especially in the commercial vehicle space. Why is that? Because there's more upside when it comes to product evolution, particularly around modularity, flexibility, and usability. So, I was just at Work Truck Week, which I'm sure a lot of you guys were, and there was lots to see. I focused my time when I was there on upfits in particular. And the thing about upfits is that they're getting more and more sophisticated. They're getting easier to use, better quality, better builds. So there's actually a lot of opportunity for dealers to become more involved in the upfit space. And when you join this notion of, hey, modularity and flexibility when it comes to upfitting a truck, now all of a sudden there's way more opportunity space for a dealer or, let's say, a third party to be involved. What is it that we mean when we talk about modularity or flexibility? Well, the formal definition is separate interchangeable units or modules that, when combined, form a complete whole, facilitating flexibility, scalability, and ease of maintenance. So why is this important? To everybody in the audience, what does this have to do with me? Well, when you embrace this idea of components and flexibility, it allows a dealer or even an upfitter to be more involved in the process. So now it's just more than sales and service. Now a truck doesn't have to be one thing forever. And in that sense, it means that, you can become a true partner in helping your customer meet their ongoing needs versus just selling them a body or a truck one time. So now we're talking about sort of adaptability, which is something we've never seen before, right? You talk to a truck owner, and it's like, hey, I'm buying this truck. I'm going to keep it for 3 years or 30 years, and that truck is going to do exactly what I want it to do for that whole amount of time. Well, now it doesn't have to be like that. You know what? I'm sad because that thing was supposed to be a graphic, really cool graphic like this. That's what you're supposed to see. Someone doing origami with a bunch of squares. Okay, so what does this new relationship look like? What does this relationship, where does the dealer sort of fit into this? Well, maybe it's a case of shelving or racking changing depending on how the business evolves, because businesses evolve all the time. We don't stay stagnant either. Or let's say as the truck ages, maybe its use case or application changes, and now you can change that truck with it as it sort of changes over time. You might be adding storage compartments, you might be adding, again, sort of racking, but maybe you're changing things inside the cab too. What you're looking at is a snowplow. It's this monster plow truck that I climbed inside. It was one of the best trucks I've ever been in. Look at the size of that monitor. Well, imagine that now you can sort of configure trucks. You can add things or take things out as you need, and again, sort of help the truck evolve. Now, we've done a lot of work at Escalent in this area as far as what sort of strategies make the most sense when it comes to partnerships in the commercial vehicle space. So let me run you through a couple of key ones that we sort of uncovered. The first one is that end users, so the customer likes the idea of standardization. You know, they want the guy in the field wants systems that work together. This is kind of what we all know, right? This idea of integration between systems. Typically, we talk about it in terms of software, but it's also a hardware thing. So again, at the show, you know, I go and I talk to the grid rack guy, super nice guy, and he's telling me about grid rack, how everything is modular. You know, you can hook things on, you can take things off at a twist. Their system works primarily with DeWalt and Milwaukee. But as you know, like when a guy's in the field, he's got like 50 different brands of tools. So yeah, for sure, grid rack's working towards sort of expanding that. And that's the key is, do you have a truck that can change or can adapt to what the needs are? This is the Milwaukee truck, as I'm sure you could figure out. And, you know, it's got the packs in it. This thing looks amazing. Like I saw this thing from a mile away and I was like, what is that? And while the packs are great, you know, people don't typically have like 7 rows of packs. You know, they might have a row or two. So while this truck looks great, it's kind of not how people work. But now if you can get a truck that you can sort of clip anything into, you know, any type of equipment that you have, then all of a sudden it becomes really a great idea. So everybody's working towards this. Like it's a great idea of sort of standardizing it so that everything fits for everybody. Another big idea here was that people think very differently around what this idea of upfit means. And I'm sure even when I said it, you were kind of like, upfit? Well, we don't do upfits. You know, we sell trucks or we sell vans or whatever that might be. Well, I think we need to sort of broaden that definition of what upfit means. So, and I'll keep referring back to the show just because it was just such a good source of information and a good source of reference. But I talked to one national upfitter. Right? We're talking about the bodies, and you know, he's saying, well, I don't know why anybody would do a body swap. Because I was talking to him about these guys who make super high quality bodies, and he's like, I don't know why anybody would do a body swap. You know, typically a body's going to outlast a truck, and with our customers flip their trucks, you know, every couple of years. They don't really care about the time and expense of swapping a body over. And then I talked to another guy, and they said, you know, we're making super high quality bodies. These things you can use these things for a good 500, 600, 700,000 miles. So right away, you have two different perspectives on longevity around an upfit, what an upfit even means. You know, if you're a guy or if you're a company who changes their trucks frequently, then you might not care. But if you talk to a municipality or a city, they go, well, we're keeping our trucks, you know, 5, 10, 15 years. We're running these things into the ground. And the idea of a body swap is great for us because then we don't have to do a rebidding process. You know, we can basically just take all this stuff off and just buy ourselves a new truck. So it depends. Again, you can sort of see the key theme here. We haven't even got dug into it too far, but the key theme is flexibility. Do I have flexibility to keep this truck on the road and keep making it something else? This, what you're looking at, is the Holman Lego set. And if you're at Work Truck Week and you didn't grab one of these things, then I'm sad for you because this thing is awesome. I got one in my office. It's super cool. I'm sure you could reach out to Holman and they'll send you one. I don't work for Holman, I'm just saying. The thing about this, what we're looking at is, again, this idea of transformation. So a Lego set, right? The whole premise of a Lego set is that you can continually change it and make it something else. Well, one of the as I was talking to, they've got these boxes and they're a storage box. You clip it into the racking that's in the back of the truck. Well, imagine if through time you could keep changing that box and the box becomes something else. So now all of a sudden it's a lockable box that you can control from your phone, which they did have. You could see what's in it, you could open it and lock it from your phone. Imagine the next iteration of that is it tells you what's inside, it tells you when you need, when your materials are running low, it tells you a location of the box, and now you're not guessing where the box is, on and on and on. So now we're talking about innovative thinking about how this thing moves through time. Really, it was really great stuff. Another big idea here was this idea of proprietary equipment. And so I'm not picking on Milwaukee or GridRack or anybody else, but Milwaukee's going to do Milwaukee stuff. DeWalt's going to do DeWalt stuff. Why are you looking at a bathroom? Because I just finished doing my bathrooms and I ended up sourcing all the materials myself. So I bought some Kohler stuff and I bought some Delta stuff and I bought some Grohe stuff, all this stuff, and I handed it over to the contractor and they're like, hey man, like some of this stuff just doesn't fit together. You can't put the Kohler piece on the Moen piece because it's not built for that. Well, that's great. It ends up costing a little more money getting the system that worked together. But that's not how fleets work either. Like fleets mix and match stuff. Their people use different tools. So from a supplier side, this idea of a proprietary market sounds great, but on the dealer side or anybody else, you want to broaden that market. You don't want things that are one type of system. You want things that anybody can use anywhere. So ditch the idea of proprietary equipment and broaden your market. I always wondered if OEMs, and I'll have to talk to someone because we deal with OEMs all the time, but if they think about, hey, if we opened it up and went to sort of a standard system, how much more incremental we would pick up than people just focusing on our system only. Sort of an interesting question. All right, so where do you fit into this? What's the whole point of this presentation is success strategy. So where do you fit? Well, imagine, okay, so traditionally modularity is the domain of an OEM. Again, I talk to OEMs all the time and they go, modularity is great because it allows us to sort of reduce our production costs. We can use one thing and then hook a bunch of different things onto it and it saves us money. Well, that's an OEM thing. And upfits are really, when we think about it, we go, oh, that's a third party thing. Like I'm going to get the chassis and send it to somebody else and they're going to manage it. Well, imagine if a dealer sort of inserted himself into that mix and became a second party. So it might be something like facilitating the swap of components. So, the upfitter makes it, the OEM makes a chassis. The dealer is sort of that intermediary who might swap things, or they might store the pieces because nobody likes to store stuff. Remember the minivans with the seats, and you take them out and they weighed like 90 pounds. And then once they came out of that minivan, they were never going back in because they're such a pain. Well, imagine if you had someone to store it for you and take it out and put it in. A dealer might rent or lease different modules so that companies don't have to not only store them, but they don't own them. Maybe the dealer depreciates them and owns them over time. So really what we're talking about here is almost upfit as a service. That is an interesting idea. And not only does it serve the dealer and the OEM and the upfitter, but it also serves the customer. So really now we're talking about a whole different strategy of interacting with customers. One of the things that we hear when we go and we do our explorations in the marketplace is that when you get a good dealer, so if you're a fleet and you have a good dealer, you love them. Like I'm sure everybody in the audience has experienced this, hopefully, But I'll talk to guys all day long. They go, my dealer's great. Why are they so great? They keep an eye out for the trucks that I need. They keep me informed in the loop. They reach out to me. I bring my trucks in for service and they're doing all sorts of little things without me asking about it. And so you get this sort of respect for your dealer. Like there's a great respect for really great dealers who know how to deal with their customers. And 9 times out of 10, they're sort of going above and beyond. Well, if you take the extension of that is dealers taking on even a more proactive role to sort of uncover and investigate new offerings that are coming to the market. They filter those out and then they inform their customers like, hey, I know this is what you're doing. I know this is what you guys are up to. Have you considered doing this? Or keep an eye out for this. This might even go as far as training in teaching customers on how to do things or how to use things. I've yet to have talked to a fleet who didn't love the fact that their dealer is keeping them up to speed and helping them understand and run their business more, not just efficiently, but more effectively. So there's a great amount of respect there for great dealers that can easily be leveraged if it's done properly. The next one is another strategy is this idea of being more entrepreneurial or consultative. Again, we talk about that respect, which is a great thing because it allows you to sort of leverage your base customer and give them incremental value. But this idea of dealers, they know a dealer when you go there costs more, but they also deliver to me a higher level of quality. I know things that fit. They know things that fit. They make good parts. They're near to me. So this idea of proximity, which means they're responsive and they're available, and it keeps my downtime to a minimum. This basically says you can easily collaborate with them because they covet the relationships that they have with the dealer. They see them as reliable. They get prioritized. They can negotiate pricing. There's so many benefits that's why they like to deal with a dealer. Now, of course, cost is one of those things that sort of can throw that off. But you've never heard someone say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to pay for something that's going to give me significantly more value because I see the benefit in the long run. One of the last big things here is this idea of expanding your horizons. And in this sense, we really need to talk about online. So online is a significant market opportunity. And I don't know who out there is leveraging this, but when we do our explorations or our research, recently what we found is if a fleet is looking for, let's say, parts, or they're looking for something to sort of augment what they need from a supply side, then not only will they contact local distributors, they'll scour the nation to get exactly what it is that they need. The exception to this is if they need it right away, then of course they're going to go local. But if not, they start looking online. They're looking for they start looking online, and the reason that this makes sense is because now all of a sudden the source of supply gets bigger, and then if they really need it, they can get it expedited, and it's there the next day anyway. So now people don't just look locally, they look nationally, which is an opportunity for you because now your market expands into a national one. Online makes sense to them because it's easy. They can integrate your online system with their online system and keep track of inventory. They get exposure to multiple brands, direct consumer pricing benefits. There's all sorts of benefits to having sort of an online portal. And so if the offering is good, now it's not just about selling to the guy, 5 miles away. Now it's about selling to the guy 500 miles away and facilitating that. So when we look at sort of the opportunity space that's out there, if we had to sort of tie all this together, basically what we're saying is in the near future, we're gonna start to experience a lot more around modularity, flexibility, things that can help make a truck stop being just a truck and help it evolve through its use cases and applications through time. Given that, if you're a dealer or even an upfitter, you can start to insert yourself into that evolutionary process and play a bigger, more significant role by helping them do that, like helping facilitate them do that. And it's not just about sort of grabbing market share in business. This is really about collaborating with others in the industry. Like, it's going to have to be a collaboration between the OEMs, upfitters, dealers, and suppliers. Basically, everybody's got to sort of, I won't say everybody's got to come together, but certainly the parties are going to have to come, specific parties are going to have to come together to sort of build out that marketplace. And not only is it going to help sort of grow your market, but you're going to do that within an existing market. So really, you're sort of dealing with two markets. And so your value is exponential. And then with that comes a more sustainable future for you. Have yourselves a good rest of your day and have yourselves a good rest of your summit. We'll catch you next time.